those that left, and in a mountainous area. And there in Pella, there was a number of the Jewish people that survived the destruction of Jerusalem. This scripture here is exactly right on it, pinpointing this prophecy that Jesus made. He said, and except, verse 22, those days be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But that's the reason there was some Jewish lineage, Jewish flesh saved, and why the Jewish people exist today, why there was a remnant of them saved. They went into Europe. They found their way into France, Holland, Germany, Russia, Belgium, and they went into Europe and grew and multiplied and became the bankers, the financial people of Europe. The stability of banking, the financial house of Europe was built upon these people, mostly of the tribe of Issachar, who was the tribe of wisdom in the 12 tribes. They were the tribe of wisdom in Israel. And they became the intellectualists of Europe. And this is one of the great things that drove Hitler to destroy them, to eradicate them from the face of the earth, to make lampshades out of their skin and decorate the houses in Germany with the lampshades of the skin and flesh of Jewish people. Of why the ovens were at Auschwitz, wasn't it? One of them places. And I've seen those ovens. Why they were burned. The gold was taken from their teeth. Horrendous things. But Jesus said, except those days should be shortened of the great tribulation, spoken of in verse 21, that was Titus. And that's when the abomination of desolation that he speaks about here in Daniel 24 took place. He said, when you see the abomination of desolation, in verse 15, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, in chapter 12 of Daniel, he said, then you stand in the holy place. And whoever reads this, let him understand. The abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet was when swine's blood was taken by Titus and spread upon the golden altar in the temple when he destroyed Jerusalem. And he poured swine's blood upon the golden altar and spread it upon the Ark of the Covenant and let it pour down into the mercy seat. And it was an abomination. Swine's flesh was an abomination for an Israelite. They could not eat swine. Swine was an abominable animal. And when this happened, Jesus said, when you see this time come, there will be no flesh saved. But why was there flesh saved? But for the elect's sake. The elect's sake. The chosen of Israel. Those days should be shortened. And every chosen Israelite that was to keep the lineage, that was to come into the 144,000 in Revelation 7 of the 12,000 of each tribe, their lineage was in that number that escaped the abomination of desolation and the tribulation of those days. Their lineage is the lineage that God saved, that will be remembered of God in the 144,000 Israelites that are to be sealed and set apart and sanctified before the coming of Christ in Revelation 7. Do not confuse Revelation 7 with Revelation 14. There's two numbers there, two set of numbers, but they're not the same. Read it carefully, and you'll see. Now, most of the church world, the ecclesiastical world, teaches, most of our seminaries do, our religious seminaries, Bible college, that they're the same. They're not the same. One is speaking of Israel, the 7th chapter. They are on this earth. They are terrestrial bodies, glorified to God. The 14th chapter is altogether different. They are celestial bodies around the throne of God, in the heaven itself, third heaven. They are there with Christ and God, and will make the descent back to the earth in his advent, his coming, in his open coming. So don't confuse those two numbers. As we go through this, you can ask any questions or make comments. But I want to point this out. Jesus' words was fulfilled. Then he said, in verse 23, that if any man shall say unto you, lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. Because in those days, when here goes that thing, now here it is. I cut it off some way or another. I mean, I got it quicker than I normally do. Here, Brother Pete, take it and put the thing to the four winds. Whatever you do with it. Okay, let me get back to the thought. In the days of the siege of the Jews, many impostors arose, because there was over 1 million Jews confined, shut up like animals, starving to death. They ate their own flesh. They roasted their infant babies in ovens and ate them like eating an animal. They went mad with hunger. They clawed at the grass on the ground to try to get sustenance. Over 1 million of them were confined. They could not do anything. They were trapped. Jesus warned them to flee. He told them to flee. He said, he gave them the signs to leave Jerusalem. Get out. Don't take your clothes. Don't come down to get back in your furniture. Get out. Go when you see these signs. And they would not take those signs. They stayed there. Many impostors arose and said, I'm Christ. I'll save you. Jesus said, when you see this, don't believe it. There will rise false Christ, verse 24, false prophets. They'll show great signs and wonders, magicians, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Now let me show you two things here. In verse 22 it says elect. In verse 24 he uses the term very elect. There's a difference. See, in other words, these wonders and signs will be so real, like the magicians of Egypt. Wonders, signs, that if it were possible, it would have deceived the very elect. Not the elect, because the elect is the chosen of the Jewish people. The very elect is the bride of Christ, the man-child itself. That's the very elect. See, the bride of Christ, the man-child, spoken of in the scriptures, Revelation 19, Revelation 12, is not just the elect, but it's the very elect. It's the very people of God, the overcomers, the very elect. You don't see that term except when he's speaking of the bride of Christ. The church is referred to as the elect of God. but not the very elect.
But are they called the spiritual Jews, the very elect?
The spiritual
Spiritual Jews?
Israel, the spiritual Jews.
So you put that one also for the ministers, the very elect?
And not just ministers, no.
I mean, the head of any movement.
You mean the gifts of God, like the apostle, the prophet? No, you could not, because that term belongs only to the overcomer, belongs only to the select, the executive branch of God's government, the bride of Christ, the very elect.
This is at the end of it.
Pardon me?
This will be at the end of it.
Yes.
Because right
Now-
now, we can call the very elect, like, the fivefold ministry. It will be the seed, the very elect, the fivefold ministry. But it can't be that because you say it's just a little higher. They already been an overcomer.
Right. See, the overcomer is the very elect.
Is
Not
that
overcoming, but the overcomer.
the 144,000?
The 100.
It's the very
The
elect,
very.
not just the elect.
Yeah.
But the very elect is
Yeah.
144,000.
Yeah, the very elect. Not anything above it, not anything below it, the very elect. Fivefold ministry, there can be ministers that are going to qualify for the very elect in that. But they're not the very elect yet, because they're overcoming. A person overcoming is not an overcomer
Not yet.
yet. An overcomer is one who has overcome. It's settled.
Perfection.
Perfection,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, now next week, because I see the band gathering in, where does time go? Where does it go? Well, it's interesting. And now that I've gotten into this, I enjoyed the books, but I'm enjoying this. I wish I'd gotten into this earlier. So next week I'll bypass the books and get into this, and get into the subject, the last advent and the second advent of Christ, because it's very interesting as we go from the 26th verse and we pick up the key verse. I'll give you this before we leave. Verse 27, it changes from the early church, from the first advent, from the destruction of Jerusalem and Judaism. It changes. Look at the context. Look at the way it changes in verse 27. For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Why would why would Christ use the language that we translate into our English language of the word east and west in reference to the sun and lightning? Lightning, east and west. Why would he use that? Because Christ never spoke without purpose. Christ did not waste his words. Pardon me?
Because it came from the east to the west?
Well, we know it did, Betsy,
I
but
meant geographically.
geographically, the lightning, he said,
What I
cometh
mean,
out of the
I mean
east
the
and
light,
shineth.
the light, the scriptural
light.
light came from the east to the west geographically.
Yes.
Does that apply?
It does apply, and we can add that in with a thought, that's good. Because light, or lightning, as Sister Lorraine said, cometh from the east, and the revolution of the earth, the evolution of the earth, the evolving of the earth, and it comes from the east, it goes to the west. And lightning is quick. See, behold, I show you a mystery. We shall all sleep. 1 Corinthians 15:51. But in the moment, the twinkling of the eye, that said, the eye twinkles, it's over. So is the coming of Christ going to be. His advent, his second advent. Some people have it drawn out.